creating creating an account and allocating your investments, setting up your report and updating your report. We'll talk about some additional resources that are available to you. And then we'll definitely leave time for Q&A, but if you have questions as we're going through, please feel free to ask those. So we'd like to just really communicate to you some of the benefits or the how this process works in terms of reporting. Learning and evaluation are very important to the foundation. It helps us to communicate impact, really focused on our standardized indicators. You're all familiar with our program level indicators, and it helps us really communicate the impact of your program in a compelling way. It allows us to collect data, and it also allows us to evaluate the impact that our investment and our partnerships have in the community. Oh, I didn't introduce Sadie. Thank you, Kenneth. And then also, I'm just skipping everybody today. Sorry. Sadie is joining us from True Impact as well, and will be a resource as well. Thanks, Sadie.
Hi, it's great to meet everyone.
And Sadie is a part of the support on this slide that says more support. So in addition to the program officers here, Ruth Mott, we have some support from True Impact as well in terms of doing our reporting. So on the next slide, we want to again provide comprehensive data and information relative to your forecasts and your reports on the funded programs, as well as the outcomes. We want to have credible data and information that really communicates the success of the work that you're doing in the community, and also allows you to share this information and data with other stakeholders. And then we really work to try to simplify the process along with True Impact by providing not only support from your program officers, but as I mentioned with Sadie and other individuals at True Impact. And in simplifying things, you're able to clone your reports, and we'll talk a lot more about this as we move forward. And we'll also discuss those other resources that will help simplify the process for you as well. So this is a representation of the reporting phases. So there's the program start, your site visit with your program officer, and the end of your program. So at the beginning of at the start of the program, you'll do your social impact report or your forecasting. And then during your site visit with your program officer, that is usually scheduled sometime before you submit. If you're submitting for a renewal proposal, your program officer will coordinate that site visit with you and let you know the information that is needed for that site visit. And then your end of the program, where you submit your narrative report, your financial report, your data reporting tool, and then your final version of your social impact report in True Impact. And so again, your program officer schedules not only the site visit, but we also send you a 30-day reminder indicating when you're at the end of your program and your final reports are going to be due. This is a representation of the reporting process from beginning to end, and we again will cover a lot of this during our session today. And I am going to turn it over to, I believe, nope, I need to go over the review of what the social impact report looks like. So here's a sample of that report. All of the components of the report are listed on the right side. So the first three sections, the overview, intervention, and beneficiaries, that should take you probably about 15 to 20 minutes to do. The outcomes section is the largest portion of the report and will take the longest amount of time or the largest chunk of time. If you find yourself working beyond an hour well, actually up to 2 hours to complete this section, then you'll need to stop and reach out to your program officer to see if there's some support that we can provide in getting that report completed. Now I think I get to turn it over. I will turn it over to our newest program officer, Kenneth Frierson.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I'll quickly move into step one, which is the creating the account and the allocating investment phase of your reporting. So you will receive an invitation for you to create an account. The email will look something like this that's on your screen, which will include information about how to log in, what your reporting timeline is, etc. It is important that the initial login will be from the email address that's set up and tied to your organizational account, which will be tied to our investment in the system or your investment in the system, okay? So be sure that you use those credentials, those original credentials that you had, so that you're not giving someone else is not logging in or you're trying a different email address. Those things can be changed later. You can actually not change, but you can add users later, but it will not allow you to log in. So if you're thinking, what was it? Then, you can ask questions about that, but that's the only way you'll be able to log in. And we'll show you how to add users to your organization's account. So after you sign in, and you'll see the navigation bar on the left, this is where you can add users, even if you wanted to add a different email address for you. And so here's this kind of step-by-step, play-by-play on how you first go to the account tab, click that, and then you will go into manage users, click on the add user button, and that's where you can include organizational collaborators. The role field is not very important here. All you need to do is select administrator, because all the same rights for all users will be opened up regardless of what the selection is that's made here. I think I said that correctly. Yes, just select administrator. It'll be the same rights for users regardless of what the selection is made here. And so after you, yeah, I think I jumped ahead of our arrows there, but after you have input all that information, you'll be ready to allocate your investment, which is language that goes in accordance with our reporting through True Impact. And in the most simplest terms, it is really what your grant is and how much your grant is, and then the level of funding for your grant. So you want to allocate and confirm your investment, which should be the title of your project. Select relevant programs to fund. This is where you can choose the reports and what your title is, and then of course allocating and classifying the investment, incremental, significant, or foundational. And so you may have heard us in the commitment letter meeting discuss this, but just highlighting incremental really is that the grant that was awarded to you probably would not exist without the funding of Ruth Mott Foundation. So we are the primary contributor there. Significant, we are a significant contributor, but you do have other funding sources that could also help the organization or the project run without a large contribution from us. Did I say that right? Did I go in reverse order? I'm sorry. Am I good on that? Or did I go in reverse order?
You went in reverse, so you might want to start over with
as I was getting to foundational, I apologize. As I got to foundational, I thought, no. Foundational is actually where we are the largest contributor to your grant. Significant, again, is in the middle there, where we are a significant contributor, but not the largest. And then incremental is that we actually provide some funding, but may not be the largest chunk of your overall budget. So the thing I want you to take away is making sure that you do verify the name of your project, the amount of the grant that's awarded to you, and then also classifying if it's incremental, significant, or foundational. Your new report, it will show up in the reports to be submitted or published. And so you will, once you put that information in the bottom right-hand corner, that's where you will then click on update, and then it will bring that information up for you. So I think Aaron will be up next to really discuss more of the report, and then we'll also, as we mentioned, cloning reports and things like that, we'll get into that information for you.
Thanks, Kenneth. All right, so we're going to move into submitting the report. So on this slide, you have a high-level overview of what all is included in a report. Not all of these steps apply to every organization. And just as a reminder, you guys will have access to this recorded presentation as well as slides after the presentation, right? Tanya will send everything out to everybody. So please don't feel the need to frantically try to track down everything that you see on the slides, because you will have access to all of that. Okay, so you'll see there's some different steps here. This is kind of the order in which they'll appear as you're working on the report. So you've got, and we're going to walk through all of these briefly in the next little bit. Okay, so on the overview, this is where you're briefly going to talk about your grant, your program name, your funded term, and a brief description. I would encourage you, rather than creating something new, to go back to your grant application and go ahead and look for sort of your brief project description, which is often housed there. I know from reading all of yours that you all do a really good job of doing that in your grant application. So rather than create more work for you, I would encourage you to go ahead and look for that and pare that down. Doesn't need to be a huge long thing, but enough for us to understand your program. And there are word counts. You're going to see them here highlighted in yellow down below. And so, you know, that's going to stop you at some point. But, you know, just know that that is based on sort of a recommendation on how much time you need to spend on an area. So time period. This is going to be taken from your commitment letter. If, as your grant progresses and as you move towards your final report, if you've been approved for a time extension variance, this is one thing that you'll want to revisit when you go to do your final reporting. Just making sure that any of those extensions were indicated here on your report end when you go to do your final report. If you need us to send a digital copy of the report because you don't have one, we can always, of your commitment letter, we can always do that for you to reference in the report. The next field is a logo. An actual logo is not mandatory if your organization doesn't have a logo, but you do have to upload some sort of image here. So it can be it could be a blank image, or it could be a picture from your program or something similar to that. But don't feel like you have to create a logo for your organization for this, but you do have to put something into that field in order to be able to move forward on the report. And if you do have a logo, it makes the report look really cool at the end because it'll show up at the top of the report. Okay, so the next thing here are the sort of 3 stages of reporting. Initial forecast, that is what all of you with new grants, that is what you will be doing here in the next couple of months. When you have a renewal grant, that's part of the process as well, but with those are organizations that have been newly funded, we're going to be focusing on your initial forecast. This is as you're starting your program. Interim reports are, unless it's indicated in your commitment letter, interim reports are not required, but you can do them as you're, updating data. We can get through that. And then final reports are at the end of the grant period. And you saw that kind of high level timeline, and Tanya will talk that through in a little bit more detail towards the end. But that is as the program, after the program is wrapped up, you're reporting on your final outcomes and outputs related to your programming. And, if you ever have any questions about what's happening with all of this, please connect with your program officer, and we can, we're here to support you through the process. Okay. So the next section here is around the intervention type. There's lots of options. So what we want you to focus on is your primary priority area. So Ruth Mott funds in 4 priority areas. You should have a general idea of which of those. If you have more than one, it's not a bad idea just to connect with your program officer to say, hey, which one is my primary? That's might be a conversation you've had before, but you're going to start thinking there. You want this to align with your project, not your organization. So some organizations have lots of different types of things that they do. You want to think about this as unless you have a general operating grant, but for most of our grants, which are project grants, you're going to think about this and to what is the primary focus of this program that I'm working on. Don't spend a lot of time doing this because you can go down a really deep rabbit hole, look for the best answer, and you know, things can be updated later, but there's probably not a wrong answer. And so just roll with it. And if you have questions, connect with us. And let's see, what else am I supposed to cover on this slide? Oh, intervention style, you know, there are, unlike traditional grant reports that request longer open fields and service description, the intervention is just looking for a category that sums up your core services. And if you're in more than one area, select that area and move forward. The next slide is related to location. So we want you to be focusing in on your Northland programs. If you are serving in specific Northland zip codes or all 3 Northland zip codes, please be sure to include that here. And think just in general, we operate in these areas. And so you can get pretty specific in this area. If you're operating in a specific neighborhood or a specific portion of the Northland or the specific zip codes. So we'll move to beneficiaries. So with this one, again, lots of options. Not everything has to add up to 100%. In certain categories, it makes sense for it to add up to 100%. For example, gender or demographics of like, ages of youth. If you're serving youth, 70% of your kids are like elementary school age, and then 30% are older. You in some of those areas you can get to 100%, but when you start factoring in a lot of different factors around things like LGBTQ or areas of racial and ethnic identity, some of those things are not going to add up to 100, and especially across all those areas, they're not going to add up to 100. So don't worry too much about that. Okay. There are some census quick facts that can be located. We can share those with you if you are looking to get a rough estimate based on general sort of census numbers for who you're going to be serving. And then as a follow-up to that input sheet, you have an area where you can provide some specific information. So you might have some specific characteristics about the group that you're serving. So if they are individuals who've had experience with incarceration or the justice system, that might be something you include here. If they're kids who have learning disabilities or other challenges, that might be something that you would include here, but you don't have to include a lot. But if there are some specific things about the group that you're serving, this is the place where you can add them. And with that, I'm going to transition over to Tanya to talk through the logic models.
Thanks, Erin. So just to give a quick overview of how the TRIMPACT system is set up, there are 5 stages that are represented within each of the logic models that you might be choosing. And so those 5 stages are program development, reach, learn, act, and succeed. And one thing we have to emphasize here is that, all of the 5 stages may not pertain to your specific program report. Some of you may be reporting on all 5 if you're doing capacity building work. If you're doing some types of workshops or seminars, you may be including learn, but depending on how your program is structured, you may or may not include all 5 steps. At a minimum, however, everyone should be including reach as a required step and succeed as a required step. So just to break those down a little bit further, program development, if you're doing anything that's associated with building capacity or technical assistance that's being provided either to other organizations. So James, a lot of the work that you're doing with First Children's Finance, that would be a great example of that for program development. For reach, that's really focusing in on the number of participants that you're serving, which is why it's relevant to everyone, because by and large, everyone should be tracking participants. And we talked about that a bit at the commitment letter meeting. Learn, if you're tracking any type of skills or knowledge gained by, whether you're talking about residents or child participants, that's what we're looking to get a sense of in the learn category. And then act, if you're tracking anything around behavioral change. So for those of you that are tracking like the self-perception survey, as an example, you may have things in the act category. And then succeed, all of you have outcomes that are situated in succeed. And if you're not sure exactly what those outcomes are, we're going to walk through each logic model for our 4 priority areas so you can begin to locate which indicators you might be tracking for your program. So first up is our youth logic model. And as you can see at the top across, you'll see those different stages: program development, reach, learn, act, and succeed. And then if you look down each column, you'll see examples of the different indicators that are being tracked within each of those different stages. One of the things that we've also done over the past year is begun to build out custom questions that are also associated with our youth priority area. So as you're looking at this table, if you feel like some of the outcomes that you're tracking aren't represented here, they're likely custom questions that are included in the logic model. So for example, James, I'm picking on you today. Number of high quality, affordable childcare slots. That's an example of a custom question that you would then provide data into the system that's not represented on the logic model, but you would still be tracking within the true impact system. And for each of our different priority areas, there's a different set of custom questions. The other thing I'll say is that if you have a grant that is in the youth priority area, we can pick on pass the time. So for example, always hope, if you choose the youth logic model, the custom questions will automatically pop up. But if you know you don't have custom questions that you have to complete, don't worry about it. It's just a function of the system. So this is where communicating with your program officer becomes super important, because we don't want you filling out data that's not required. So if you choose a youth model or any of our different logic models, the custom questions will show up, but make sure that you're only responding to questions that are connected to the outcomes that are listed within your commitment letter. All right. So we're going to jump to the next few logic models, and the layout is still the same. You see the 5 stages at the top and the various indicators that we're tracking and how they're situated with each of the different phases. And so if you're tracking safety outcomes, some examples of those might be the various speak to your health survey questions. So if you know you're tracking neighborhood engagement, if you're tracking civic participation, things like that are examples of what may be included in the custom questions that are located in this safety logic model. All right. Again, same format for economic opportunity. If you're tracking things like, number of participants that open bank accounts or direct deposit, Those are examples of different custom questions that would be located as part of our economic opportunity logic model. And then lastly is safety, neighborhoods. So within the neighborhoods logic model, again, if you're tracking, civic engagement, if you're tracking community involvement measures that are associated with our Speak to Your Health survey questions, those are examples of the custom questions that would show up there as well. All right, so once you have chosen one of the 4 logic models that is connected to your program design, which basically happens as part of this screen, you'll be going through a few different steps that are connected to the 5 stages that allow you to define success and give more detail around how you plan on tracking that particular measure as part of your program design. And so as you go through the different stages, you'll get to a screen like this that allows you to begin that process of giving more detail about what you're tracking within the True Impact system. All right, so we just talked through selecting the specific template that you will be using. That's where you would choose one of the 4 priority areas, and that sets the stage for what indicators would be shown. If you're again running into challenges and not sure which logic model you should be choosing, definitely touch base with your program officer, but a lot of that information you should have already just based on what you've provided in your application. But again, it's always important to have like your commitment letter handy so that you're able to use that as a guide to complete many of the steps that are included in the system. All right, so this screen gets you to, gives you a layout of what those different stages look like. Again, every step won't be relevant to every program. What will happen is you'll get to each of the different logic model stages and it'll ask you specifically for information regarding each outcome. So for example, on the reach stage, it's asking you specifically about information pertaining to the number of people served or that participated in your program. So it's a good idea to have your sign-in sheets, attendance logs, that information handy so that you're able to easily just enter that information in. For many of you, that's just a matter of having your data reporting tool available, which we're creating customized for each of your programs. So it's really just a matter of plugging those numbers directly into the screen associated with the reach stage of the logic model. All right. And then we're just going to jump to the succeed stage because again, learn and act may not be relevant to everyone. And here what the system is going to ask you to do is to select the specific indicators that you're going to be reporting on based on what you've already provided in terms of the logic model that you're focused on. So whether it's, succeed in school as an example, or any other number of outcomes that are identified in your commitment letter, you would basically just be selecting those indicators on this stage within the True Impact system. And then once you select those specific indicators, again, the system is going to just prompt you to provide some additional information. First, it's going to ask you to define success. So in most cases, how you're defining success should be connected to the language that's included in your commitment letter. And so if it's simpler for you to just copy paste that language from your commitment letter, feel free to do so. But the system does require you to include something that helps describe, in this case, the reach that you're focused in on. From there, it's going to ask you to forecast your impact. And this is where you would give a specific number associated with the impact that you're tracking. Since here we're looking at reach, in most cases, it's the number of participants or properties or parcels that you're tracking that is connected to the language included in your commitment letter. And so you would want to provide a specific number. Ideally, this is a number that you would provide before your program starts. It doesn't necessarily mean that's where you'll end up at the end, but it's your best projection around where you anticipate achieving reach by the time your program has ended. Once you give your forecast, then the system will ask you to categorize the measurement. And basically what that means is the system just wants to get a sense of, are you directly measuring this indicator? Is it an estimate based on some information that you might have readily available, or is it a guess? 99% of the time, this should be directly measured because we've, as program officers, have worked closely with you to make sure that any indicator that you're tracking, you have a plan in place to track that specific measure. And if you're uncertain, I know all of you worked on developing an evaluation plan that should clearly outline how you plan on tracking each measure. So there are some rare cases where it might not be directly measured, but for most of you, it should be directly measured for each indicator that you're tracking. All right. And then if there's any specific backup that you want to provide that is based on a specific indicator. So let's say, for example, you have a survey instrument that you want to include as part of a specific measure that you're tracking, you can upload that here. In most cases, we already have your survey questions because you should have provided that to your program officer. But if for whatever reason you want to provide like a survey instrument here, that gives more context to a specific indicator, you can definitely upload that here. All right, and then finally, I think you might have jumped. Yeah, so if there's any additional language that you want to provide that describes a specific measurement. So if you want to, talk about whether or not it was pre-post data, if you're doing some type of focus group and you just want to give some more description, you can do that here. In most cases, that language will likely be also captured in your final report. But if there's something you want us to know, especially prior to your program officer's site visit that might be connected to a measure that you're tracking, you have the ability to add that language here as well. And then finally, the upload documentation. In most cases, this is where you would add your data reporting tool that gives a breakdown of all of the different measures that you're tracking that connect to our program level indicators. We realize that everyone might not be using a data reporting tool. In some cases, you might have your own spreadsheets and tracking systems that you're using. If that's the case, please let your program officer know, because we do go through the process of creating individualized data reporting tools for every grantee that's tracking participant level data. And so this becomes a good place for you to upload that because it captures all of the indicators that you should be tracking connected to your commitment letter. Okay, so in this next section is focused on the budget. And this is really a high level summary of your budget. To clarify, this is not your final financial report. That's completely different. This is just intended to give us a snapshot of your overall funding. So this isn't limited to just the Ruth Mott Foundation funding. It's really intended to capture all of the resources that are tied to the specific program that you're reporting to, or if you're getting general operating support, all of the resources that are connected to your organization. So this should be higher level. It does include both cash and in-kind resources, and it just helps us better situate what the Ruth Mott Foundation investment is to your program or project relative to other resources that may be coming in as well. So if you're unsure about this, you can't stress it enough, definitely talk to your program officer, because in most cases, this should line up to other information you've already shared with some new information that may be coming into your organization. But don't spend a lot of time on this. If a conversation is helpful to get this step done sooner, definitely have those discussions with your program officer. All right, so the next section is custom questions. Again, if as you're going through it, you're not seeing the indicators that you should be reporting on, usually they may show up here in this custom questions section. Again, don't be alarmed if it pops up and you notice that none of the questions are relevant to your program. If it doesn't apply, just keep moving through the report. We don't want you filling out information that's not relevant. And so the way that the system is set up, it'll show custom questions regardless, but don't get tripped up here and think you need to fill things out that don't pertain to your program. All right, so as you go through the system, you'll begin to see progress being made within each of the different sections of the report. And then you'll eventually get to a screen that looks like this, that gives you a sense of what you've already completed, which shows up in green check marks. It also may show yellow exclamation points, as well as red X's that may indicate an error. This doesn't necessarily mean that you've done everything completely wrong. It's just a checks and balance step that allows for troubleshooting to happen before you pass it on to your program officer. And so if you're coming into any of these, the yellow exclamation points or the red X's, definitely circle back, make sure that there isn't something that should have been completed that wasn't. And you can also reach out to us and see if there's anything that we can provide by way of support to address any concerns that may come up. Sadie, is there anything else that you might want to add as grantees are getting to this screen to help them, address challenges?
Yeah, I would say that your program officer has really spent so much time to set you up for success here. And so they have been feeding you the answers to this test for some time. And that's in your grant agreement, and that's in the logic model that you've already completed, exactly what everyone has said. Use those as the source for everything that would be populated here, because that's what your program officer is going to be reviewing in order to make sure that they have crystal clear understanding for this logic model. Yeah, I think just everybody covered it.
Okay, thanks, Sadie. So if all works out and you're connecting with your program officer, you should see a screen that looks like this with nothing but green checks. And once you get that, all you need to do at this point is click submit for feedback, that green button on the left-hand side. And at that point, it's ready to be reviewed by your program officer. As a courtesy, it's always a good thing just to email your program officer, just to let them know, you completed it. We currently don't have that automated process in play where the program officer is notified, but that's something that the team at True Impact is working on. So down the line, we'll be able to have that automatic notification. But for now, once you click submit, reach out to your program officer and let them know, and they're able to then start the feedback process. So I'll pass it over to Elizabeth at this stage, and she can take us through step 3.
All right. So at this point, everybody can take a deep breath because you have completed your draft report. And so the heavy lifting is done. And I'll just say that the first time is the hardest, and then after that, it's going to be a whole lot simpler. So the updates are oftentimes relatively easy breezy. So once you have clicked submit, and your program officer is going to then have it in their hopper where they get to take a look at the report. And as Tanya said, it really is helpful at this stage if you can send us a quick email just to let us know that it's there, so we can go in and take a peek. And so when a program officer is reviewing your draft True Impact report, what we're looking for primarily is to see, are all of the requirements that were listed in your commitment letter with that little asterisk thing, the True Impact reporting outcome, are all of those things addressed? And then, as has been stated by others, is it covering the correct project period? Those sorts of things. So your first report is for everybody going to be in the forecasting stage. That's another thing that sometimes I've noticed that somebody might be doing an initial forecast, but they might be calling it interim. So that's another sort of thing that I might flag as I'm reviewing it. So after your program officer completes their initial review, there may be points along the way where there is a comment. And so maybe it is something like, oops, you've got it marked interim report. At this stage, it should be a forecast. Or maybe it's, I don't see this particular indicator listed. Can you please add it? Those sorts of things. And so once your program officers completed the review and they've clicked submit for their feedback, then you will be notified about that you have some feedback ready for your report. And at that point, you'll want to log back into True Impact, and you'll see a display something like this. In this particular case, it looks like this grantee has 4 different reports. So you'll want to locate the report that's relevant to the one you're working on, and then go ahead and click on that green or orange button in order to take yourself into that report. And at that point, you will be able to see the exact comments that your program officer typed in for you. And those comments are organized along the same kind of headings as your True Impact report, so that you can easily see which section of it have they left the comment for. As you are addressing those comments, it may be pretty simple. You don't have any questions. You just make the change that's been noticed. You can mark it as resolved and then move on to the next one. If you are looking at the feedback and there's something that you don't understand or you're not sure how to address, that's a time where, again, we've said it 100 times, we'll probably say it a few more times before the training is over. Call your program officer. We're there to help. And sometimes it's helpful to have a chance to meet together so you can share your screen and we can talk through whatever the item of confusion might be. Once you've addressed all of the items that have had some feedback and they're all clicked resolved, then you're going to be able to submit your updated report. And it's a very similar process to what you did the first time in terms of if there's any flags, maybe you missed a step, that'll be noted. But if they're all green and you've addressed all the areas of feedback, then you're good to go. You just click submit, and that then puts it back for your program officer to do a final check and make sure that it's everything's been addressed and it's good to go. So with that, I will say, if there's any questions, please feel free to ask them. And if there's no questions at this stage, then I will pass the baton to Sadie.
So the True Impact website that you see here does have some additional pieces of feedback. Do you want me to share my version of the PowerPoint, or is this fine? Oh, great. Okay. Oh, I don't, it's probably just fine if you want to share. Sorry. So what you're seeing here is the True Impact Help Center. We have both a configured Ruth Mott Foundation resources page, which provides you a lot of specific questions. I know that you're receiving this this particular training, but sometimes you have a really specific question for each section. And we have here basically 1 to 5 minute videos for each of the sections. So if you have a question just about allocating an investment to a report, or just about how to deselect an indicator that you accidentally selected, you can go here to the Ruth Mott Foundation support resource page, or the True Impact resource page. There you'll be able to get all of those questions and kind of technical issues answered here.
Thanks, Sadie. So with that, I will wrap us up and we'll have a few minutes left for questions, but we will be sending a link to the survey, and I think someone may be able to also drop it into the chat. That's just about your experience with the workshop this session today. So please do complete that when you get it. It's really helpful to us, and we use that feedback to make sure that we're providing the best experience to everybody. You'll get a follow-up email that includes the recording of today's presentation, as well as the materials, the PowerPoint slides, all that we just shared today. And then you'll also get a separate invitation with your True Impact login and the reporting timeline that should be coming from us soon. And you'll also, then you're going to want to log in from your organizational email account and get your process started. And then get your forecast report going. And I know we have a few people on the call that you're definitely doing forecast for your renewals, but you may also have some final report steps. So, please know that we recognize that there's different things going on, but for all of our new grant recipients, you're going to be starting with your forecast, and that is for the grant that was just approved. And with that, I will stop sharing my screen, and I think we can open up to any additional questions.
Erin, I have a quick question. I was told by Christian that we previously had issues with saving progress. So he just asked kind of if, I don't know if you were aware of that situation. It might have also been an internal computer issue on our end as well, but if that sounds familiar at all, and if anything's been done, or if there's best practices for, saving while you go, I would be interested to hear.
Sadie, do you have a thought on that?
Take that. Yeah. So in the case of, if you get an error, an internal server error, or any other errors in the system, that's something that I likely am going to be your point of contact for. And there is a help button in the process. What I would recommend you to do is click the Save and Next button for each page as you move forward. It's the natural way that one would complete one page and proceed. And so the Save and Next button is likely the one you'll use, but there are some instances where I've seen that error pop up, or with people's experience. If you see data being lost, that's a technical issue that we would want to loop back on. So that's where that support goes. It doesn't go to anyone else but straight to me, and I can set up a call to troubleshoot, or if you send a screenshot, that will usually help me log in, replicate it, and address the issue with the software team.
As you're reaching out, please make sure you're copying your program officer, just so that we can keep track of all correspondence.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's really helpful to us. And also if you're reaching out to Sadie to do any, I mean, like we're your primary contact now, but if there is something that you're troubleshooting or doing like putting something on the scheduler, it's always helpful for you to include us on that, because one of the things is that we've been working with the system for a while and we're certainly more proficient than we were when we first started, but we still continue to learn and evolve. And so it's helpful for us, even if our input is not necessarily necessary for what's happening, it's helpful for us to learn and follow that along so that when these questions come up for others, we can provide support to them as well. Tanya, you wanna, I don't see any other questions. You wanna close this out?
Sure. So I did drop the link to the survey in the chat. If you have time to complete it now, it's pretty quick. We use that information to help inform any changes that we need to make to the onboarding session. The other thing that I want to emphasize is that we also have office hours that we're currently hosting. So every Wednesday from 10 to noon, and then every Thursday from 2 to 4. By appointment, we schedule time with program officers and with grantees to walk through any challenges that you might be experiencing. So if you are getting to a point where you're ready to complete your forecast report, or you're working on your final report, and you'd rather do it with one of us available, those times are always options for you. So if for whatever reason that Wednesday or Thursday time doesn't work for you, we're happy to figure out an additional time, but we set those up just so that there's, you know, availability ongoing to address any challenges that you might be experiencing with True Impact or with your data reporting tool as you're working on those pieces. So be on the lookout for the email that lets you know about your investment. And as you work your way through the system, we're here to help. Don't feel like you're going to go through it by yourself. We want to be as helpful as possible to you throughout the process. And with that, thank you all and have a great rest of your afternoons.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.